It was bigger than you remember. Speed Racer was a show made for the growing fan base of both car racing and anime. Out of context, it might seem like a poorly animated comedy, but it was one of the pioneers of anime's popular action drama genre. It's right up there with DBZ and Naruto, and that's probably why you saw it on Toonami at one point. What was really the big deal with Speed Racer, and what's in store for it in the future? So I've seen a lot of these random, out of context clips showing moments from the old show Speed Racer. They tend to show how blunt and mean the main protagonist was. And for me, instead of giving me nostalgia, it was giving me this weird Mandela effect on my memory of it. Because I don't recall the show having this type of energy. I don't recall Speed Racer saying things like this.
Oh, Trixie, please stop talking. I'm trying to figure something out.
But maybe what I was seeing back in the day on TV was super censored, like it was the 4Kids version of Speed Racer or something. Well, I decided to dig into this, and wow. Somehow it all involves our old friends, Cartoon Network and Nickelodeon. First of all, Speed Racer indeed is not just a cartoon, and it wasn't exclusive to neither Cartoon Network nor Nick, but was dubbed and imported for Western consumption as an anime. An anime that is actually pretty old. It aired in Japan, Australia, and in the US during the 60s. Around the same time, new Hanna-Barbera cartoons like Space Ghost were airing in the States. What Hanna-Barbera and Speed Racer have in common is that they were both Saturday morning cartoon franchises that were added to Cartoon Network's roster during the network's first few years. Cartoon Network just started out in 1992, only having the huge libraries of Warner Brothers, Hanna-Barbera, Tom and Jerry, and Droopy, but surprisingly, right as their original cartoons were coming out around 1995, they started airing Speed Racer in syndication, purely out of its popularity, availability, and probably just because Cartoon Network just really likes old cartoons. What's even more surprising to me is that even before Cartoon Network started airing it, legend has it that it was airing early in the morning on MTV in the early 90s. Speed Racer was so popular in the States low-key that they made an unauthorized reboot in 1993. But first, where did this show come from? Also known as Mach Go Go Go, anime pioneer Tatsuo Yoshida designed the manga series in the 60s, where it very quickly made the jump to animation in 1967. Yoshida drew together several different inspirations, including an earlier racing comic he worked on and American culture. Yoshida apparently liked the James Bond spy cars from films like Goldfinger and the look of Elvis Presley's race car driver character from Viva Las Vegas. Mach Go 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 would tell the adventures of an ambitious young man named Go, or Speed Racer in America, who becomes a professional racer. Yoshida used the anime series to expand on the story happening in his manga. Sadly, this is all he would get to see of his creation, because Yoshida ended up passing away in 1977 at just 45 years old. While 52 episodes and 2 volumes of the manga were produced between 1966 and 1968, the show's mainstream success in the US started in the late 80s, as a comic series based on parts of the manga was launched in 1987. While comics were being made and the 60s show was starting to make a comeback through reruns, Speed Racer Enterprises was established to make it all a part of a Speed Racer franchise. A part of this franchise building attempt was a 1993 Americanized reboot called The New Adventures of Speed Racer.
Go, Speed, go. Let that Mach 5 thunder roll. You got the power, Speed Racer, let it show.
This was not authorized by the official production company of the anime, so The New Adventures was off the air after 13 episodes. The anime production company produced an official, modernized version of the original anime in 1997, Mach Go 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 Restart, where the English adaptation would be called Speed Racer X. Only 13 episodes would be adapted into Speed Racer X due to licensing disputes between Speed Racer Enterprises and These overseas licensing situations were pretty complicated actually, and very few anime was actually getting licensed and adapted into English. The 90s was when it just started getting taken more seriously. Funimation was the first distribution and licensing company to show how successful anime can really be in the States by licensing and redubbing Dragon Ball. In 2015, Funimation would actually acquire the license to Speed Racer and released the series in HD for the first time. But the growth of the Speed Racer franchise continued into the 2000s, and IGN would eventually rank the original show at number 29 in its Best 100 Animated Series list. In 2007, Entertainment had acquired the worldwide rights to the series. While Cartoon Network at this point was still able to air the original episodes late night and eventually on Boomerang, Nickelodeon would try again at airing Speed Racer by getting those 13 episodes of Speed Racer X. The two networks, Cartoon Network and Nick, were quietly fighting over Speed Racer. While Cartoon Network would have to stop airing the original show, Big Brother Warner Brothers still had the rights to a live-action Speed Racer. They would finally use this card for the 2008 CGI-heavy action film written and directed by the Wachowskis. You know, the same directors who had just finished making the classic Matrix trilogy. It had been in development hell since around 1993 when the new Adventures of Speed Racer was trying to be used as a launchpad for a movie. Those who remember the live-action Speed Racer movie remember how it bombed in the theaters and was never spoken of again. But as a sly way to promote this movie and to make a new Speed Racer show, Speed Racer: The Next Generation was produced to be aired on Nickelodeon's Nicktoons network. This would get 52 episodes, just like the original, and from 2008 to 2013, Speed Racer was an official Nicktoon. I mentioned earlier that Funimation would come in 2015 to buy the rights to the anime. They started putting out both English and Japanese versions of Speed Racer shows on Blu-ray and DVD. Live-action wise, future plans for Speed Racer include an Apple TV Plus series to be developed by J.J. Abrams and his company Bad Robot Productions. Apparently, Abrams had an unproduced script for a live-action Speed Racer left over from the 90s during peak Speed Racer popularity. In this peak 90s era, while Speed Racer Enterprises was building up the franchise, there were video games for the PlayStation, Game Boy, and Super Nintendo. CD-ROM, and even Namco made a Speed Racer arcade game. Capcom even considered using Speed Racer and Samurai Pizza Cats in their 2008 crossover fighting game, Tatsunoko vs. Capcom Ultimate All-Stars. A big part of the Speed Racer merchandising was in toys and comics. There were Lego sets, dolls, action figures, and of course Hot Wheel cars and model car builds. Every time Speed Racer got remade, there was a new limited series of comics to be released around the same time. And even in the hype around 2008, the old manga series was converted to a hardcover box set. Speed Racer, I feel like, went under a lot of people's noses. It flared up in a time where anime wasn't really being recognized as it is now. On the surface, to many, it just looks like an old cartoon being rehashed at, like Scooby-Doo. But Speed Racer, at the end of the day, was an anime. And anime tends to be pretty layered. Most of it isn't really made just for kids. It's the general difference between anime and cartoon. Speed Racer, surface level, out of context, will look like it's about some pretty boy narcissistic athlete. But it's really about family, a loyal girlfriend, growing up and dealing with the pressure of succeeding in a dangerous sport where the competition would love to see you dead. The protag, Go, or Speed Racer, is unaware that one of his frequent competitors, Racer X, is actually his older brother, someone who, years ago, had a falling out with Pops, their father, after crashing a car he built for X to race in.
But my beautiful new car is all smashed up. What about that, huh?
You'd think the father, Pops, would just be glad that his son survived the crash. But no, Racer X vowed to continue on with racing on his own terms without his crazy, overbearing father, and in doing so has come up with a secret identity in order to compete with his younger brother, surely someone that he pities for having to put up with Pops in the first place. X keeps up with Speed Racer for the competition and to make sure he's safe, all while still avoiding their father. And that's just on the surface. So yeah, this isn't just a cartoon about racing cars. Like most anime, it boils down to having characters we can all relate to. Speed Racer is classified as shonen, which makes it the same demographic as Naruto, Dragon Ball, and One Piece. Just like with them, it's a fast-paced, action-filled adventure centered around a brave, ambitious, tenacious, maybe even dumb protagonist. By understanding that, you can understand why it would end up doing so well overseas, because the sport alone, race car driving, isn't interesting or popular enough by itself. Even Disney and Pixar had to give cars eyeballs and mouths to get people to watch a movie about cars. The manga creator took something ordinary like old school race car driving and added spy gadgets and 60s fashion. This is what mangakas do, man. They'll take something like basketball and make it about regular people in robots playing basketball. Speed Racer definitely had potential as a franchise, and while the handling of it after the creator's death was kinda sloppy, it still reached an audience all around the world. It's about time for a Speed Racer reboot, and I guess J.J. Abrams is going to be showing us what's next. So for more random nostalgia and interesting coincidences surrounding said nostalgia, you should like, subscribe, and click that bell, because I'm putting out videos every week now, and a lot of y'all are missing out. So do that for me, and I will see you next time.